We are going to have a chat with the CFO of Soldo. You've heard about Soldo earlier today. So we are going to have what we call a fireside chat. And with Dynshaw Italia, we are going to discuss how finance is driving agility and how finance teams have adapted and evolved over the last few months. So welcome, Dynshaw Italia. It's a
Hi, Armand.
pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
And so again, the CPE code is stake. We did hear about your company this morning, but maybe you would like to remind us what your company is about and tell us more about yourself, because you have 20 years in a few companies, small, big. So we would like to hear it with your own words.
Sure. So I've been very fortunate. I worked for a number of fast-growing companies. I was very lucky to, I actually did my chartered accountancy, trained with KPMG for a number of years, but got very lucky and was the fifth employee in eBookers, the travel agency, and became CFO very early in my career. And we built that business from zero to $1.4 billion in about 4 years. It's a really good success story. It got sold to an American conglomerate called Sendint. I then joined Cobra Beer, another very fast-growing company. Was their CFO and COO for a number of years till it became a joint venture with Molson Coors. I then worked in a water technology company, and my last role was with Labara Mobile, which is the largest MVNO in the world.
Great. But a few words about Soldo. We can tell, Soldo, you're, I think it's a bit Italian, so I'm sure it's about money.
So in simple words, Soldo is all about liberating business from the spending chaos. So I think there's technology that exists in everywhere to deal with different kinds of areas like revenue, etc. But today, technology to actually deal with managing spend doesn't exist. And that's what Soldo does. And I guess while we talk, I'll probably touch upon Soldo a bit more and go in more granularity there.
Okay, so you've been in a few large and small companies, some growing very fast, and now you've joined through this tough period of COVID. So what would you say from your own experience? What are the areas of finance that have been the most impacted over the past few months? And I'm sure it would be almost the same for the past crisis you've seen, or maybe you can compare crisis because this one might be unique. So which function has been most impacted?
Yeah. So it's interesting because actually most finance functions remain the same, whether it's budgeting, whether it's planning, whether it's management accounts, cash flow management. But what's interesting is that actually the finance function has become more prominent and gains more importance during a time of crisis. And what I found is that in a time of crisis, focus shifts more to cost control and cash flow. So you tend to start doing continuous reforecasting, because when you look at forecasting and reforecasting, it's probably easier because you're forecasting only on costs and not on revenues. But at the same time, it's harder because you're trying to forecast when things will get better. And what tends to happen is a lot of people just forecast on the P&L and not on the cash flows. And cash flows are very hard to forecast because in a crisis, are your customers going to pay you back or not? So your working capital forecast becomes very, very important. I think you also, in a crisis, there's a higher demand for information. So people want things quicker, they want to know things quicker. And I always say that today, for businesses, cash is no longer king. It's gone up one level. In a crisis, cash becomes God. It becomes emperor, if that's what you want to call it. So it becomes that much more important.
Okay, so thank you. So we talked today a lot about automation and this new technology, and yourself, this Soldo kind of startup is using all this new technology. So what do you see in terms of new technology and regarding automation, the way this has evolved for the past few months?
So I think it all stems from the fact that companies are demanding quicker and quicker turnaround for information. They want financial data much quicker. They want it on their fingertips. You know, as consumers today, we are so used to an on-demand economy. You know, if you want things today, we want it now. If you want a cab, you order an Uber, it comes in a minute, and you go there. The same way in business, people are demanding information in real time. So if you take Soldo, for example, and this is this is where I'll talk a little bit about Soldo, is we address sort of let's say, four main pain points. The first is delegation of payments. So payments today is controlled by one or two people, and it's very difficult to delegate payments as banks do not provide granular access to money. So it becomes a big issue in difficult times because those people who are controlling money don't want to release the money. But ultimately, you want to survive. You don't want to kill your business. So with our technology, we can create multiple wallets in multiple currencies at a company level and a departmental level, allowing you to delegate this payment process. Another pain point is trying to control the spend at the source itself. Again, here with technology, any payments that need card payments, you can create any number of virtual cards, you can create physical cards that are linked to a department, a cost center, an expense category, or even a supplier. So just to give you an example, we could, for example, set up so that you have daily or monthly budgets for the cards. You could restrict a card to only work in a geography. You can restrict a maximum per transaction. You can restrict it only to an expense category, so it only works, for example, with fuel, or to a particular supplier, or restrict it online. So that means you're enabling and reducing the risk of overspend, and you reduce the risk of abuse of the card. The third pain point, which is an interesting one, which all finance departments face today, is manual reconciliation of expenses at the month end, chasing people for receipts, manually inputting it into accounting systems. With tech, we can automatically detect the expenditure when the expense is incurred. We can provide the ability to attach receipts automatically, auto tag expenses, and of course, directly link into the accounting systems as well. And then finally, which is the key point that I think, is the ability to track real-time spend. And because we own the entire tech stack, we have our own e-money and banking license. We are able to provide real-time analysis of spend. So the minute you incur a card, you can see real-time on a granular basis the spend by department, by company, or by individual. So you don't have to wait 1 month and then know what you spent and what you haven't. So I think it plays, for Soldo is quite an interesting technology because it's very, very easy to adopt. You don't need to spend, it's actually quite reasonable to adopt as well, but you could be up and running in 24 hours. And so what I find with finance teams, and I see it sometimes as well, whenever they say you've got to adopt new technology, there's a sort of resistance. Because, oh, how much is it going to cost? It's going to take so much of my time. We don't have time to spend. How is it going to work? But there are a lot of technologies like ours that actually is very, very simple to implement. Within 24 hours, you're up and running. You could have your card set up, and you could be using the platform and controlling your spend.
And this all over Europe, the world?
So our banking license, our e-money license covers all over Europe. So right now we can operate all over Europe. If we wanted to go into outside Europe, then we would either have to get our own e-money license or we would have to partner with a bank to do that.
Okay, so you are leveraging new technology to solve some pain points of your clients. So would you say it's the same for any companies, any CFOs, any IT teams looking at what are the pain points and looking into which technology they can leverage to solve all the issues? Is it a typical trend you see, or typical?
It's a typical trend in some areas. So, but it's the concern that finance team has is valid because not all technologies are easy to implement. So to make a big change in technology, if you're, for example, if you're changing your accounting system, it can take a lot of effort, a lot of resource, a lot of time to do that. You have to plan in advance. But then there are some technologies that are very easy to adopt, like ours. So there's always a balance. So sometimes when people say, when is the right time to adopt technology? Should you do it in a crisis or should you do it at a time later? There is actually no right time to adopt technology. You do it as your business needs it. If your business needs and you are scaling and you are growing, you can't afford to reach a situation where you grow to a certain extent and then everything collapses because you don't have scalable technology. So that's
Yeah,
where we are.
you touch a good point. You are lucky enough to use new technology because you are a new company, but some CFOs, some companies, they have all these legacy systems. So, what would you say that they plus now they have issues with the investment? So, would you say that they better keep the current legacy systems and implement some new easy to implement new tools, or should they try to bridge between the two, and it might be more costly, might take more time and so on. What do you see and what do you recommend? I mean, you've been through so many crises.
Yeah, so ultimately, if you're a growth company, you always start with technology that's cost effective and simple to use. And then you reach a stage where you're starting to scale and you need to actually change your entire technology. It's unfortunately, I don't think many companies today start with the biggest system so that it'll just scale infinitely. The reality is that people will start with what they can afford and they'll start with what they can do because they don't know whether the business is going to work or not. When the business starts to get traction and they can see that the business is starting to grow, at that point in time, they should start to invest in a scalable technology. They shouldn't wait too long because if you wait too long, there's never a good time to do it. Because if you're on that sort of 100 miles an hour growth trajectory and you're trying to then change your entire system, you're going to have problems at that point. But I think a lot of the cloud-based technologies that we are seeing today allow you to layer it onto what you already have, not necessarily have to change what you have. So it may be that there is a sort of bridge where you can get new technologies, for example, like ours, that can work, which is totally cloud-based, works independently, and can be integrated with your own system if that's what you want as well. But they can work in both ways.
So is that how you bring agility, or how would you define agility, and what are the other ways to make the finance function more agile?
So again, I'll take it from a growth company. I always believe in one philosophy. You either adapt or you die. There is no in between. Today, when you start with a product, you never end up with that same product because things are changing so quickly. So you have to be changing with the times. And ultimately, if you stick to the philosophy that what you're trying to do in a finance function is provide accurate information for decision making as quickly as possible. How you do that, what technology you use, that is the agility. The agility is not necessarily the type of technology that you're using, it's the ability to provide that information, and technology is just a tool to be able to do that.
Okay. Then more and more, and because of the crisis, CFOs, they have to react fast. I mean, to be agile and help their CEOs drive the business. So, what type of information do you see being are needed to drive the business? Actually, and I would say almost real time.
Yeah. So it's an interesting question because what I see today is that if you're online, right? And a lot of businesses are obviously online and there's a digital transformation, as you said. then there's a lot of readily available metrics for revenue for customers through whatever, Google and all these big players who are able to give you that real-time information. And so you get real-time information for the revenue side, but you're finding that on the cost side, that's not existing, which is why we are able to as Soldo, are able to provide that and fill that gap, because that real-time information on costs is not readily available to all CFOs unless they're using technologies like ours. And then to have that real-time information, it enables quicker decision making. So I have this philosophy that says real-time data allows you to fail faster. And now let me explain that, because in a growing business, there is a constant need to change and pivot and test what is working, what is not. And so what you're always experimenting. And if you don't have real-time data to actually tell you what is working or what is not, you'll suddenly start to spend too much money or burn too much cash on an idea that probably is not going to end up working. And so that's why it starts to become more and more important that you have that at your fingertips. So you can decide, okay, this is now working. Let's shut it. Let's move to the next sort of project, and so on and so forth.
So let me ask you. You mentioned that you were in a startup, which was then sold to a big company. So what do you think is success for a company like Soldo? You are a startup. You're doing very well. So do you think this type of company should go further and be more agile, be more innovative, or cash in and look for what do you see? What do you recommend? I mean, let's not talk only about your case, but what do you see in the
So
business?
it all depends on the market opportunity. It depends. If you're in a very small niche market, then you build a business to a certain size and then you sell it. With Soldo, it's very different because you're trying to address a space that actually is a new business area that hasn't been addressed in the past. So if you think about us, we are trying to basically provide a platform that can control the company's entire spend. Eventually, that's our vision, right? So any spend that goes through the business, which is your main cash flow driver, you should be able to use Soldo as a technology to deal with all those use cases, to be able to control the spend at the time of spend, to be able to monitor it in real time, to have access to that information on your fingertips. So for Soldo, it's the expansion, the ability to get this product to all businesses, whether it's small businesses, medium businesses, or large businesses, is there. So to sell now or to sell in a few years wouldn't make sense because there is so much growth opportunity. Of course, if that starts to stop, then at that point in time, we decide what needs to go. And ultimately, I guess the shareholders decide what you do with it. But right now, we are so early in our business cycle, even though we are progressing well in Europe. But with the digital transformation, which of course helps a business like ours, with the changes that are happening, with the demand for real-time information, with the demand to control spend, I think there will be a continuous need for Soldo for many years to come.
So are you what type of companies are you targeting? Small one, medium size, even the big ones, because they all have the same issues of controlling costs.
It's interesting. So when we first started, so what is unusual about the business? So I joined about in March, just before the crisis. And what I realized about the business is that they had actually invested a huge amount in the platform and the technology, so that actually the technology is able to work across all types of use cases and all types of companies. However, it started with the simple use case of travel and expenditure, travel and entertainment as the first use case. And then obviously slowly over a period of time, now people use it for digital marketing, they use it for recurring payments like SaaS, for fuel cards. And interestingly, recently during the crisis, the municipality of Milan sort of was trying to get food vouchers to a lot of people who needed food, and we pitched for the tender, and we won the tender. And the reason we won the tender was, one is it's better to give somebody a card to use to buy food than give them food vouchers. It's much more empowering. The second is, with the card, you could actually set limits so that they spend a fixed amount per week, so that they don't go and spend the entire, whatever, 500 euros in 1 week, and then they have nothing to spend in week 2 and week 3 and week 4. You can restrict the spend only to work on food, so they can't spend it elsewhere. You can see live who's using the spend and who's not. You can top it up. For example, with a food voucher, you give it to them once, but if COVID continues, then you have to go through the whole process of giving them food vouchers again. With Solar, you would just top it up instantly so that they would get the money on their card, and then they can use it for the third or fourth week. And then also the last point, which is quite interesting, is if the person has not used the money is still the municipality of Milan, so they can take it back with the touch of a button. So there's no wastage. So you've not given somebody a food voucher that then they don't use at all and it gets wasted. So it's quite interesting. Like you say, with technology, you can keep use cases keep coming. Charities now, we found that would be really useful for charities to actually monitor their spend, because what is the biggest issue when you give money to a charity? You want to know that it's going to the right place and being spent in the right way. And that, again, the Solo technology allows you to do that. So it's very
So
interesting.
it's a card that you have in your wallet, and you travel with it.
Or you can use it online, a virtual card, or you could
Online.
have a department card. You could have anything. There's so much flexibility. You could have a one-time use card. Yeah.
But as CFOs, and you mentioned it a little bit, but let's go back to, how do you control the spend? I mean, you control the amount, but are you control that someone is not going to play around with the card, and well, it's real time.
So so that's the beauty, and that's the way when the technology was developed, the idea was that it would be driven through budgets. So let's give you a simple example. So let's say there is a logistic company who have 500 different drivers, and each of those drivers need 500 pounds a month for fuel. Simple example. We could give them all a card that they have that's with them, that can set all the limits. So it could set that you can maximum use 500 in that entire month. You can maximum use 80 pounds per fuel that you do it. It can only be used at service stations, cannot be used anywhere else. So what we've done here is we've set the control parameters right at the start. So you know exactly what it is, and then given independence to the person driving the vans or whatever to have full independence of how to use that budget for that particular purpose. So it can't be misused. You have full real-time tracking, so you can see at any given point in time, okay, this driver here has spent only 60 pounds or 70 pounds, and it's only week 1. The whole cohort of drivers has spent X amount, and so on and so forth. So you're controlling it right at the point of spend. So the chances of it being misused or the chances of it being abused is very, very little. And that's how you control this.
And do you plan to use maybe like AI and so on to do some predictions, or maybe to actually even to check for fraud? Like these new fancy tools. I mean, I don't want to
Yes.
know about your IP, but what's coming?
No,
What's coming?
absolutely. AI will be the next thing to actually analyze patterns of spend, patterns of where it's happening, predict what the spend could be. So you would have a lot of information then to actually be able to tell customers, give them a heads up saying, this is what it's looking like. You can then predict what the spend would be going forward. So there's lots of stuff you can do, and as technology starts to, it's already there actually, and you start to sort of use it to the best ability. It's all about data and how you use data and how you interpret data and how you portray that data back to the customer in a most insightful way so that they can benefit from it.
Okay, you are still very young, but you've been through a few companies. So, what would be your key recommendations to our colleagues CFOs to drive agility and to go through crisis with the least amount of nervous breakdowns?
So the first foremost thing is, and I say this again, cash is the most important thing in a business. And whatever you do, you need to make sure that you're planning and always have sufficient cash in the business. And forecasting, reforecasting in a time of crisis, you can't just forecast once because things are changing all the time. You have to continuously reforecast, you have to continuously manage your cash flow. So cash, like I said, in a crisis is God or emperor, or whatever you want to call it. It is the most important. Once you fundamentally can get that right, you can't go the other extreme and absolutely kill your business. So the whole idea through a crisis is to survive it, but not to the extent that you kill your business. So some companies will just say, I'm not going to spend on anything. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to just shut everything down for 6 months or 1 year and hope that things go fine, but then you've killed your business. So you have to be able to adapt. You have to be able to, so look at Soldo, for example. Of course, when the crisis hit us, people stopped spending on travel and entertainment. Totally. That doesn't mean that you don't start to look at other use cases, like the municipality of Milan example that I gave, or other customers who were like a Deliveroo customers who were actually trying to uh, provide logistics so that you can pick up your groceries on behalf of customers. So the key to a business is continuously you need to adapt. You need to find new use cases. Every crisis will be a problem, but it's also an opportunity if you look at the right place for the opportunity. So all I can say is look at cash flow and make sure you adapt or you will die. It's as simple as that.
Okay, so
Innovation is necessary.
okay, so tomorrow you are going to see the CFO of one of your prospects. So what is your pitch? I mean, what do you tell him in the first 30 seconds to convince him?
So the pitch is very simple. It's today you are not able to control and manage your spend. You don't know how much you're spending. With Soldo, your technology, number one, you can be up and running within 24 hours. You can actually control your spend at source. You can have real-time visibility of all your spend at different levels. You can delegate payments so that your finance department will have more time and don't have to worry about reconciliation, chasing receipts. So you can make your life easy, and the cost of actually doing it is so negligible. It's only 5 to 10 euros a card that you would use, and that's it. I mean, one person's time, 5 to 10 euros a month, one person's time, 5 minutes or 10 minutes of their time probably costs 5 to 10 euros, 10 euros. And you'd be saving so much of their time, making their life easier, and being able to real time control your spend.
Good. Okay, last question. If I'm a CFO, I want a Soldo card. You've convinced me today. What do I do?
Well, there are two things you can do. The first is you can just go on online, and you would be able to onboard customers online almost instantly. If you're a larger customer, automatically, if you start to input saying, actually, I've got 100, 200 sort of employees and I want 100 cards, instantly somebody will contact them and take them through the onboarding process. But generally, for most small businesses, it's very easy. They could just do it online straight away without any input from us. Or if they want input from us, we have a fantastic customer interaction team that'll handhold them throughout the whole way for onboarding.
But you talked about the cash of your clients. So how do you make your own cash? What's your pricing scheme?
Yeah. So pricing scheme for us is very simple. So we charge a SaaS model. So for every customer, we charge an amount per card. depending on if they just wanted to use the app and the card, it's I think somewhere around €5. If they want the console and they want a much more wider sort of use of the platform, then it could go up. So we have a sort of pro and premium product. It could go up to €10 per card. So that's our model.
Thank you. I think we are coming to the close of this chat. Anything? We have I think about 200 people listening to you. What would you like to say as a word of conclusion?
So, word of conclusion: finance departments in a crisis gain way more. They come right in the front of everything. So there's a lot of pressure on them to deliver information. They're no longer in the background. Everybody's looking to the finance teams for insights, for information. So as I said before, focus on cash and projecting what your cash and how much cash runway that you have, when will cash run out. Look at ways of innovating and adapting rather than standing still, because if you stand still, you will not survive. Look at innovative ways of creating revenues, of controlling costs. Of course, I would say make sure you have Soldo on your technology list, because that will help you control your spend and have real-time information on spend. And it's all about survival and getting through the crisis, and look for opportunities. Crises do create opportunities. Like you said, it's a digital transformation. All businesses are going more online. I always look at my 70-year-old uncle. Before the crisis, he never went online. Now he doesn't go outside. He's only online. So there's a huge transformation of people going from where they were before to going online. So there's a change happening, and we have to take advantage of it.